All right. Welcome in, everybody, to episode number 4 of the Monty and Murdy College Football Show. We thank y'all for joining us, joining in with us. Monty, how you been, man? What's been going on?
Uh, Exhausting. So I'll preface this episode. We started recording this episode for about 5 minutes, and then all of a sudden the sound cut out. So we're kind of restarting our conversation. But no, I'm still exhausted. Got the move over with. For the most part, got the move done. It's obviously new setup, a boring setup behind me for right now. Still got to get the podcast stuff situated, but the move is for the most part complete. At least moving from one place to the next. But other than that, yeah, I've been good. Yeah, just trying to recuperate money wise and be able to get stuff going for the pod.
Yeah. So for everybody, we just kind of want to apologize for last week. We didn't put out an episode. Monty was in the middle of a move. He was moving out of one house, moving into another one. That's why we weren't able to get a pod recorded. I told him he probably could have just made his girlfriend just do everything, but he didn't want to end up on the street or anything like that. So that's why we had
That's
to
right.
take a week off the pod. So we apologize for that in advance. But we got a pretty good episode for y'all this week. We're gonna dive in. First thing we'll go into is our conference power rankings. Following that, we'll hit our 12-team playoff predictions. We'll let you know who we think is going to win what conferences, and then who those 7 at-large teams are going to be. Following that, we'll have a college football 25 update. I think Monty just finished another season, so he'll catch y'all up, how he's still liking the game, what he's thinking about it. And then we'll have our dub and dud of the weeks, both of ours each. And then we'll follow it up, or we'll finish with, like we always do, with Monty's weekly hot take. So, Monty, you want to go ahead and dive in, man? Who do we got as our conference power rankings? Who do you have as number one? Who is the number one conference?
So as I stated previously that we did not get recorded. Yeah, so like I said earlier, obviously got the top four group, Power Four conferences, and we talked about it prior to recording this. Ours, mine, and Murray's top four are all the same, matching as well. Obviously, number one, I think anybody can agree on this, but that's going to be the SEC. A lot of powerhouse programs, consistently, even prior to this upcoming season, consistently are going to be at the top. A lot of high expectations from other programs coming into this next year. So I think it's a pretty clear-cut by a top conference. And, obviously you got Georgia coming back, preseason number one. You got Texas in there in the top 5. You got Alabama with their lowest preseason ranking since 2009, the number, which is pretty wild. As much as it pains me to say, you got Mizzou at 11 and Ole Miss at 7, I believe, 6 or 7. And Tennessee at 15. So a lot of high expectations. It's kind of a no-brainer that they're going to be the top conference this coming year. Then another probably not so much disputed number 2 is going to be the Big Ten. I thought about putting for a brief second, but I thought about putting the Big 12 at number 2. But I think the heavy teams at the top there of the Big 10 are too powerful to not put them at 2. In Ohio State, Oregon, Penn State, and even Michigan being the reigning national champion. Then, of course, like I said, Big 12, number 3. Like we talked about prior to the episode airing, a good conference, but I think they're just going to beat up on each other too much to really have at least statistically at the end of the season, have a real standout conference champion. But other than that, I tried finding a reason in my 12-team prediction, the playoff prediction, to get more than one team in there, and I just couldn't find a reason to. And so I put that as the number 4 overall conference in my conference ranking.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I know is that number 3 spot is pretty debated hotly. I know you almost consider the Big 12 and the Big 10 pretty close.
Yeah.
But I think nationally it's looked at as, the SEC and the Big 10, they're clear cut number two. I think some Big 10. I think you got to be a really Big 10 homer to try to debate it against the SEC.
Yeah.
But a lot of people, they debate the Big 12 and the ACC. I think it really comes down to is that the ACC does have a couple top end teams. With Clemson, Florida State, they've both won national championships within the past. Well, Florida State's was now 11 years ago, so just outside of a decade ago. But still, I mean, they've been nationally relevant. They were right outside the playoff picture. 13-0, and they finished in the number 5 spot. Last year. So I think with that, people try to debate the Big 12 versus it, and I think the Big 12 just has it's got a real deep middle to it.
I was gonna say, I think it's the reason why I feel like the Big 12 deserves to be at the 3, and why only briefly again, thought about the number 2 spot. I think it's more just like what you said. I think it's just across the board. They have a pretty, decent like middle ground where it's like, Iowa State, Oklahoma State, Baylor, like those teams are like good some years, and then they're not so good. But when they're not so good, you have, those other teams, and now you have like UCF, and Houston ACC.
No, Houston. It's Big 12.
Yeah, so like teams like that where you can, these teams. I just think it's across the board, which is why I respect the Big 12 so much. Which is also though why I believe that they're all going to beat up on. Because there's that middle, they're all like that middle ground.
Yeah, I mean the Big 12. They used to, Kansas football used to be a real joke. But
longest time.
Yeah, now they've kind of upgraded, and it's like, you look at even the bottom end of their conference. Who would you say the worst teams are going to be? And you look at that, Big 12 preseason rankings, or however the media did it. It's like, the worst teams they're considering are Houston and Cincinnati. Well, Cincinnati, just a couple of years ago made the playoff. Houston, they were only a couple seasons removed from a 10-11 win season. And that's the bottom end of that conference. That they're only. Yeah, and I think it's, it kind of comes down to it where it's like, the bottom end of the Big 10. It just doesn't stack up, at the very bottom down there. Which people, they'll say the same thing about the SEC and Vandy. It kind of is what it is. Vandy's a founding member of the SEC, so they're not going anywhere. It kind of just part of it. So yeah, following that, following the what are now the Power 4 conferences, you kind of get down into what is now used to be the Group of 5 is now considered probably the Group of 6. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, the Pac-2 is still a conference, but I mean, 2 teams really isn't a conference, at least to me. I mean, I consider them almost more a collective independent, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I guess that's one thing we could also talk about that I didn't think about earlier was, I mean, the Pac-12 or Pac-2, still call themselves the Pac-12 kind of. If they want any chance of continuing on as a conference, they're going to have to poach some of these Group of 5 conferences, which would in turn basically make the Pac-12 a Group of 5 conference. Unless those teams, and it would still take time unless some of those Group of 5 teams that they do poach become learning factories and start competing with those bigger names, and like I said, that'll take a long time. So I would still consider them probably a Group of 5. And right now, obviously, just the 2 of them. Gonna have to put them at the bottom of the heap, but
yeah. So we can go ahead and dive into those. The Group of 6 or Group of 5 now. So following that, at least the way I have it, I got the Mountain West, followed by the Sun Belt, Conference USA, the AAC, or the American Athletic Conference, then followed by the MAC, the Mid-American Conference, or I believe that's what it is, and then the Pac-2 below those.
Yeah, it is.
And then, like I said, there's the Group of 5 is kind of an interesting. It's kind of hard to have a good knowledge base on what all those teams got and the players they have. I don't have an unlimited space in my head for college football knowledge, but at least, you think about the teams predominantly coming out of those, Mountain West probably highlighted by, Boise State, Conference USA with UTSA, Texas State, Sun Belt with Appalachian State, and a couple others.
Texas State's actually in the Sun Belt.
Oh, is it? Okay.
UTSA's in Conference USA. Texas State is one of those Sun Belt teams that I can kind of speak on. They could, with where they are, they could be it. It's hard to say with those things. Like I said, we only know so much about them, but they could definitely be a 10-2 at the end of the regular season. But also, I mean, 8-4. So it's hard to say in those conferences, especially because the competition is so much more even across board in most of those conferences. It's hard to tell, which is what makes it fun and why they call the MAC with the MACtion, late night MACtion.
Yeah, late night
MACtion. Those
MACtion.
are always duking it out. So yeah. And then West, I know I can speak on the Mountain West a little bit with Boise State. Fresno State is always pretty good, and I think they have a good band of starters coming back. If I'm not missing on somebody else. Nevada, I don't know a whole lot about their roster, but they're a weird team because they'll be good one year and then the next year it was like a couple of years ago they went like 0-12 or some 1-11 or something like that. But that that goes back. That's just kind of how a group of five is across board. But Mountain West is definitely a conference I'd probably put at the top or near the top at least when it comes to group of five, group of six.
Sorry, we had a little bit of a mic difficulty, so we're cutting back into the show. So let's transition back to our preseason 12-team playoff predictions. Monty, we'll have you go ahead and start down yours. You can go 1 through 12, and then we'll talk about it. We can kind of discuss it as you go through it, and then I'll hit mine, and then we'll discuss mine as we go through it. So I'll let you know if I have any questions as you're going through.
Yeah, that works. So yeah, obviously the first top five in the playoff are going to be your 5 conference champions, your first 4, and then your one group of 5, your highest ranked group of 5. Number 1, I got he's going to be that Big Ten champion. That I believe is going to be over Ohio State. I do believe that they will meet each other at championship. A long season ahead, but a very realistic prediction. Them at number 2. 3. Now this kind of contradicts what I said earlier. Conferences, but I do believe that Florida State is going to be at the 3 seed rather than the Big 12 champion, Iowa State at 4. Going 12 to the ACC, that's going to be a 3 or 4 seed, So I was like, well, that's going to be the new standard. So yeah, it's not as weird if they do win the Big 12. So yeah, Iowa State's going to be at the 4. Number 5 is going to be that group of 5, and I have 2 teams here, so I wasn't really able to decide. But I got App State and Liberty. I've been hearing a lot about App State, and they're gaining a lot of traction with people being that group of 5. I guess call it champion to get that 5 seed. But going off what Liberty did last season, and then they got a veteran, really good quarterback. I would call him a veteran, and he is a former Tennessee guy. I know he's a very talented quarterback. We saw what he did last year. Liberty him to the 13-0 season. We got our at-large. Well, I don't know if you want to. Do you want to kind of talk about the five? Well, before I
Yeah,
go on.
so I know you had originally predicted Iowa State. So the only really so the mic was cutting out just a little bit. We'll see if it cleans up in the After Effects audio, but
Yeah, yours is a little too.
yeah, so did you have Georgia, Oregon, and then Florida State?
Yeah,
Okay. So you had then followed up you had Iowa State at number 4,
and then App State / Liberty.
App State / Liberty at 5. Big thing. So it's kind of been at least if you look at like polls across the nation, Utah's been kind of deemed that Big 12 favorite. Is there a reason? Do you see them and Iowa State meeting in the Big 12 championship, or how do you see that playing out?
Yes, I do see them. There's two scenarios I see going on with the Big 12 championship. Both outcomes being that Iowa State wins, only because I believe back as their quarterback, he's got a year under his belt. Yes, he's a young guy, sophomore, but he's got the year under his belt, and he really didn't do that poorly last year. And then Coach Campbell, their head coach, he's really like this is the year he's got. We talked about this on one of the episodes briefly,
Yeah.
but this is a big year for Campbell, and I think that between the recruiting and some of the guys that are coming back, they got a couple guys that are, which is normal for Iowa State, but they have like spotty here and there guys that are like first round projection. So they have a good enough roster to at least be in contention for the Big 12. I'm not saying they're necessarily do anything with it, being at that 4 seed. But I just want whoever's listening to didn't realize it until I thought about it before this episode. It to you, because we're used to the 14 playoff, it does crazy to put Iowa State at a 4 seed, but it's because of the new alignment of the playoff. Somebody's ACC or Big 12 or whoever is going to be that 3 or 4 seed. Whether they're the national 4 seed or not, it's just what they're going to in the playoff, right? So 25 other than me, you noticed in the 12-team playoff on there, you'll be like the 4th seed, but you'll be like number 12 in the country. So it's just throwing that out there. But no, I mean, I think this is a year that Coach Campbell needs to prove that he can win the Big 12 with Texas and Oklahoma gone, and these new teams coming in that they're a group of he shouldn't be losing to any of the time and lost. And he's been at Iowa State for 7 years, if I'm not mistaken, 7-8 years.
Yeah, pretty good amount of time, pretty good tenure there.
Yeah, and he hasn't had a horrible tenure. I think he only had one losing season, maybe 2. But yeah, so I do think that they definitely have the only thing that they would really need to get by. They're kind of both teams that I talked about being in each state, Oklahoma State and Utah, being at the top. I think 2 teams that he needs to worry about when it gets to the end of the season. Because as long as Iowa State and Campbell can take care of those 2, I think that 4th spot, 3 or 4 spot is theirs.
Yeah, like I said, I mean, for me, when it comes down, if I'm predicting a game or whatever, first thing I'm going to look at is, okay, who has the better quarterback? That'll kind of sway me, and then I'll look at, hey, who's got the better defense? For me,
I believe Cam Rising is the better quarterback, absolutely.
And then I'll look at Utah's defense. Now, granted, I mean, the Pac-12 did have a really good season last year as far as, all the teams and all the quarterbacks. Like, it was really a kind of a weird year for the Pac-12 to go out. I mean, they had Michael Penix. They had Bo Nix at Oregon. They had Caleb Williams at USC. Like, they had a really good quarterback class there, playing that season. So with that, I mean, I look at Utah returns 9 out of 11 starters on that defense. So I'm looking at it, I'm like, okay, that's a defense you can trust. And then you got a better quarterback in Cam Rising. To me, I think Utah, like I said, me personally, I predicted Utah to take that 4 seed. But we can get into mine here in a second. Our first 3 are the same. I mean, I think those are going to kind of be the favorite on for those conference. The Florida State, after going 13-0, I know they understand they lost the bowl game, so 13-1. Then you got Georgia winning the SEC, kind of the odds-on favorite, and then you got Oregon winning the Big Ten. It's kind of a toss-up between them and Ohio State. Kind of whoever you want to pick there, kind of pick your poison.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing, right? Is I have the SEC and Big Ten runner-ups in the 6th and 7th spot. So it's like, and both the teams that they're over, in my opinion.
So let's roll on. Let's get to where it's going to get real controversial. It's going to be those at-large bids. Who do you have starting out for your at-large bids?
Yeah, so like I just said, I have the SEC and Big Ten runner-ups at 6 and 7. I have Texas as the runner-up at 6, so at 6, and then the Big Ten runner-up at 7, Ohio State. Those can be pretty interchangeable, I think, especially Ohio State and Oregon. I think that, however, if Ohio State were to win the Big Ten, I think Oregon would be the 6 and Texas would be the 7. And this is just depending on kind of how last year went, kind of, but going into this next year, at least with the roster that all those teams have now. But right now, it's going to be Texas at 6, Ohio State at 7. And then this is kind of going back to that bit what I was talking about, the Big 12. I have Utah at 8, which I believe is the runner-up in the Big 12. So it's not like I don't have another Big 12 team. You think that they're good. However, I would say that if Utah is at the 4th, I don't know if Iowa State would be in that top 12. I just think that's how they would, how the committee would look at it. I think Utah, just in their eyes, is a better football program than Iowa State. Utah did end up winning the Big 12. And Iowa State, don't know they'd be in that top 12, but I think that in this scenario, Iowa State at 4, Utah would make sense. I have another SEC team at 9. That's Miss back-to-back with Alabama. I do that even though, they don't have Nick Saban coach, I think obviously the new head coach coming in, I think they're still going to be a good team. They still retained a good bit of recruits, and he obviously got some transfers to follow him. So I do think Bama's still going to be a pretty good team. We'll see if he can hit the ground running with that team. If he can, I mean, there's no reason why we can't put him in that SEC championship conference. Big Ten team, number 11 at Penn State. I think because it is a top 12, or like the top 12 with the 12-team playoff, I think there's enough room for them to make this playoff. And then obviously going with one of my hot takes earlier on in an earlier on episode, I got University of Tennessee at 12. I think we sneak in at the end there with an at-large. That would put us at 1, 2, 3, 4. Be the 5th seed in the SEC based on that. But I think we will finish the record and end up right. They just sneak in there at the end. And we'd be coming off a loss to Georgia, and that'd be our no, I guess we're not in the playoff basketball type tournament. Now, I guess we would play
you play
State Liberty.
Yeah.
So I believe that both of them so have a real shot. This is our year. So
yeah, I think that one of the things that added in that group of 5 champion it adds a really interesting dynamic because you very well could have a team like Tennessee going to play at Liberty, if that makes sense. So with Tennessee, I mean, being on that bottom line end, it's like, you have the opportunity for a team like Tennessee, a big SEC with a big following, to go play a game at Liberty University, because the higher seed is going to be the one hosting those home playoff games.
Right.
So, you have the opportunity for that to occur. And, it's a very, very, very legitimate possibility. It's going to happen to somebody that they're going to go play that at that Group of 5 school.
Which that'd be a lot of fun for those Group of 5 fans, I think, especially if we ended up playing at App State. It's close enough to East Tennessee, Knoxville. It's close enough. I freaking snowboarded up in those mountains. I mean, it's close, but App State has a big following as well. That'd be a really fun game, I think, for people to go to, especially as a smaller number 5 team to host that playoff game. But I think we'd head them out.
So with that, so what records do you have at kind of like the bottom end? If you look at last year's, week 14 final, the one made right before the teams went to the playoff, there was no 3-loss team in the top 12.
Yeah. Was it top 12 or top 11? I thought LSU, or was LSU at 13?
LSU at 13 was a 9-3.
LSU was 13, and they were 9-3. I mean, who knows, right? Because it's the first year for the 12 team. I mean, I think based on the new kind of reconstruction of the play, I think a 9-3 SEC team could make it at the back end there. Probably. I mean, I think that 9-3 record is going to be the same the new argument as like the 2-loss teams going into the 4. Like, can a 2-loss team make the 4 team? Can the 3-loss team make the 12 team? I think controversy like just based on off-season, our 12-team playoff season, number one, I do think it would make sense as a 9-3 or 10-3 or whatever team, Group of 5, or Power 4 team makes it. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I think it's really going to boil down to, I can get into it a little later whenever I go through my 12-team playoff prediction, but I think it's really going to boil down to is, what do you have on that schedule? Who did you play? Because there might be a 10-2 team that played maybe one top 25 team, lost to them, or there might be and then there will be a separate one that played 4 top 25 teams. It may have lost to 3 of them, but it beat one. So it's like, what do you have on that schedule? Who did you play? Yeah. Who did you lose to? Who did you beat?
Well, because let me ask you, because this is, I mean, do I think it's going to happen? No, not a whole lot of people believe it happens either. But would a non-conference champion 9-3 Florida deserve to make it with that schedule?
I would say probably so. Yeah.
So Florida has 8 top 25 opponents this next year, preseason. So, yeah, I mean, it's an argument, doesn't 9-3. Which do I think Florida's going to win 9 games? No, but does a 9-3 non-conference Florida, a 9-win team, do they make that? Do they get that 12 spot? You could easily make an argument for it.
I would say probably undoubtedly. I mean, if Florida goes 9-3, I don't see how because I mean, they would have wins over whoever they beat, whether it be at LSU or.
Well, because look at it this way. So say they over. So their losses would be Georgia, Texas, and Ole Miss. Top 3 teams that they played. Number 4, number 6 preseason, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that means they beat 13 Tennessee, 13 LSU, 10 Florida State, 20 A&M, 19 Miami. So it's not like it's not impossible. Like that's probably happened before for other teams in the past. Maybe, I mean, somebody can fact check me on that as well. But if they lose to those top teams, which is pretty predictable, but they win everything else and they go 9-3, they're not in a conference championship, most likely. And at 9-3 with a good resume, do they get? Again, a hypothetical said no. I don't think they.
Yeah, so looking at that, we can go through my list. So top three still the same: Georgia, Oregon, Florida State. Following that, I have Utah, for the reasons we kind of discussed with Cam Rising and those 9 out of 11 starters returning on defense. I feel like that's a team I can really trust. I actually have number 5, Boise State. I believe they return a lot of production on defense, kind of similar to Houston. And then they got Malachi Nelson from USC transferred in, former 5-star quarterback.
That was the big one.
And I just think with their schedule, like I said, how I break down teams, who has the better defense, who has the better quarterback. They return a lot on defense, and most of the teams they play on their schedule, outside of I believe they got an early matchup against Oregon. Outside of that one, I believe they're probably going to have the better quarterback in those matchups. So I believe for them to pull through. Number 6, similar to you, I have number 6. I have the Big Ten runner-up, who's going to be Ohio State for me. Like I said, I had, just like you do, I have Oregon winning it. So I have Ohio State at number 6. 7, I have the SEC runner-up, but for me, it's not Texas, it's Ole Miss. Just kind of, I have a little question marks about the Texas run game now, especially since they've suffered 2 injuries back to back. And then I also have some question marks on the defensive side of the ball. I think they're going to return a good O-line, Quinn Ewers. I think, he's a solid returning quarterback. And then they got some good production coming back in the transfer portal. I still have them making the playoff. They're at number 8, so just right behind Ole Miss. But they're just going to be that next team out. I just see Ole Miss being the one who faces Georgia in that SEC championship game. Following them, I got one you're going to hate. We discussed it on the last pod. Notre Dame. Notre Dame at actually at number 9. Sorry, Notre Dame at number 9. It's just tough for me to find. I could find possibly 3 losses on that schedule, but I think they'll win one of those ranked matchups. So I think they're going to be a 10-2 football team. And just looking at last year's, week 14 final, there was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10-2 or 11-2, 2-loss teams in that top 12. And I think that Notre Dame, they're going to be one of those this year. I think they're going to be a 2-loss team that gets it in.
That's another thing about it's like the 10-2 non-conference champion.
I mean, to be fair, they don't have a.
Right, they're independent, and I know they've made the 14 playoff before as a non-conference champion, as an independent. But it's like, and for me, if I was Notre Dame and I went 10-2, I'd almost want that 12 seed because you play that group of 5 team, which it makes it look a little better for you because you actually get a playoff win. But because I'm not a big believer in Notre Dame anymore. I used to be a big fan, but anyway, continue.
Yeah, so Notre Dame at that number 9. Following them, I got Alabama at 10. Just there's a lot of talent on that roster. Jalen Milroe coming back. Kalen DeBoer, he's a good offensive coach. We'll see if they're going to be as good on defense. I know Saban, he's kind of got a one-hand-off approach on that program. He kind of helped DeBoer transition in.
The big brothers always watch it.
Yeah, exactly. I think he's got a helicopter parent for that program. But I think they're going to be good on offense, and I think they got too much talent to lose probably more than 2 games. So I see them coming in at that 10 spot, not playing for the SEC championship game. I know the Roll Tide fans are going to hate to hear that from me, but I just, year one, it's kind of tough for me to predict that. Everybody's kind of wondering what it's going to look like just because that's been a program of stability for so long under Nick Saban that it does raise some question marks. I mean, I'm a little lower on them than the national media is. They're saying number 5. I'm a little lower than that just because I want to see kind of what it looks like first under Kalen DeBoer. Number 11, I got what's going to be a hot take. It's going to be you gave me too long. If we would have done this episode last week, this team would not be in my 12-team playoff. They weren't. But you gave me too long to buy into some fall camp juice, some fall camp hype. And number 11, I got Oklahoma. I have them going 9-3. They have 6 AP top 15
so you
teams.
have a 3-loss Oklahoma making it at 11.
I have a 3-loss Oklahoma making it at 11.
I'll know.
Because, I base it straight off of, outside of Florida, I'd say OU's right up there with hardest schedules that anybody's got. I mean, they face 6 AP top 15 teams. With those being Tennessee, Texas, Ole Miss, Missouri, Alabama, and LSU. So if OU can handle and take care of business on the other teams that they need to, be it a South Carolina, Auburn, within their non-con of Maine, Tulane, Temple, and Houston, if they can win those 6 and then go
you gotta
3
be
for
careful. You got to be careful with that trap game in Tulane coming to Norman. You got to be careful with those guys.
Yeah, you got to be careful with the Green Wave. I know Willie Fritz, he's not there anymore. He's actually at Houston. They'll face him the week before. But I think if they could get through it, they can go win those 6 games, win the Auburn game, win the South Carolina game, which, Jordan Hare is a tough place to play. I'm not saying that is a lock by any means. I mean, that's going to be a tough environment to go play in, for sure for Oklahoma. But if they can win those 6 games and then go 3 for 3 on the top 15 matchups, I'd say a 9-3 Oklahoma, and led by what I've said is going to be that's going to be a stout defense. That's going to be a defensive led football team, and if they can just get, it's so I was listening to Joe Klatt. He kind of discussed them today. He predicted it, or I think it was 2 days ago. He predicted a 9-3 Oklahoma team, and he listed the reason is he's like, I got to trust the coaching staffs. If you didn't believe, if the national media, if Dylan Gabriel was still in Oklahoma, would they have him as a top 12 team? Most likely, right? I mean,
well, but that's why you play the game, and that's why the transfer thing, whether you agree with it or not there. And I'm not saying Oklahoma can't make it. I think they're in every bit of a they have every bit of a chance as Tennessee. I think Tennessee and Oklahoma are very, very even teams, which is why I'm so excited for a game this next year. And I thought 15 and 16 in the preseason poll. So, I'm not necessarily disagreeing with you. I just still a firm believer. As of right now, obviously, prior to the season, the inaugural season of the 12-team playoff, I just don't know about the three-loss teams making it. So I think that Oklahoma can make it, but they'll have to go 10-2 at least. But like I said, that's obviously preseason. So
yeah, it's just when I weigh it down, there's going to be some teams that I predicted in our preseason poll, like Missouri. I predicted them to go. I'm predicting a 10-2 Missouri team. But I think whenever you weigh it and you have a 10-2 Missouri team, and then you have a 9-3 Oklahoma team, I think an Oklahoma team with that schedule, with the wins that they would have, at least on some of them.
That's a different argument, because I would have to disagree with you there, because depending on what Mizzou, despite their schedule being far easier, at least than Oklahoma, still talking about a 10 SEC team, not and a 9-3 SEC team making. And I don't think that'll happen. I think that a 10-2 Missouri, a 10
So how I have it working out is I think Oklahoma is a better team than Missouri head to head.
Oh, I roster wise, I probably would agree with you.
And I'd say they beat Missouri. So the two losses I have Missouri taking are to Alabama and to Oklahoma because they play this year.
Yeah,
And,
right. And that's
I'm
why
saying if you have a head to head against Missouri, and then you have say you have one more loss than them, but they're 10-2, you're a 9-3 with a win over them. I'd say there's not much argument to be had over who has the better strength schedule, who has the better win, and who has the head to head.
I guess it would come down to I think that wouldn't matter if their conference record is better than Oklahoma, despite losing the all. Because say, and I don't know off the top of my head how many conference games Mizzou has. We play 7 or 8 now.
Eight conference games. All ACC teams play 8.
Okay, so say it goes 6-2 in the SEC, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Oklahoma goes 5-3.
Yep.
And so they're 9-3, Oklahoma is, and Mizzou's 10-2. But a loss to Oklahoma. You still think Oklahoma makes it?
Yeah, I think absolutely, because you would think.
I definitely disagree.
Well, see, the thing is when you think about it, right? They would have Mizzou at that point would have one. If we're looking at preseason rankings, we'll say a hypothetical world where Mizzou preseason rankings are 100% right. They never are, but we'll say in this world they are.
Yeah.
All right, so we've had a lot of technical difficulties this episode. So if it cuts out, we're just gonna let y'all know that hey, we try to get an episode together for y'all. Something with our recording software, they're going through an update, whatever, so it's not getting done properly. But we'll continue on. So we had so if you have a hypothetical world, right, where Missouri is that 10-2 team, and say the preseason rankings carry over.
With a 6-2 SEC record versus a 9-3 Oklahoma.
Correct.
With a 5-3
with
SEC
Oklahoma
record.
Having a win over Missouri and a win to the head-to-head. I think the way it gets weighted is that a 9-3 Oklahoma with, say, the preseason rankings hold, they never do, but say that is exactly what they end one's looking like. That'd be a 9-3 Oklahoma with 3 top 15 wins.
The committee never, ever, ever picks a team in the same conference over another for having a worse.
Well, I just don't think we could.
Record. Not saying it can't happen. It's just it doesn't make sense. And if I was a Mizzou fan, thank God I'm not. If I was a Mizzou fan, I would be freaking fired up if I found if 9-3 Oklahoma with a 5-3 SEC record. So I have records and I have a better conference record, and I get left out of conference over that, or excuse me, into the.
Well, I think you could clearly point to like, hey, you lost the head-to-head. Like, how can you argue that you're better than this team whenever y'all played on the field and you lost?
So in the past, right, there was like an East and West or a North and South and intra-conference, right? And you would have two teams on one side that had the same record, or at least the same conference record, like 5-1 or 6-1 or whatever. But that the one team that gets in has the head-to-head. Even if that top team had the head-to-head, or say you had Georgia and Florida in the SEC East, right? They play each other every year. So say they're both 5 or 6-1 at the end of the season in the SEC, but Georgia won the head-to-head. they would get the SEC nod, right? But if Georgia won the head-to-head, but they were 5-2, and Florida was 6-1, Florida would still get the nod.
Well, I think
that's how it's always been.
I think there was.
So why would?
I mean, maybe I'm mistaken, but there was a year that Alabama didn't even play for the SEC championship, and they still got in the playoff.
Okay, well, what point? I mean, I would have to remember.
What I'm saying is they didn't finish even in the top 2 of their conference, but they still were one of the 4 best teams in the nation. Does that make sense?
You're talking about 2020. Yeah. It's either 2021 or 2022. Georgia played. Didn't Georgia play Alabama both those years? I know what you're talking about. Well, anyways, they had a better record than whoever they were trying to get into the playoff, and it was I forget who it was.
Yeah,
we'd have to.
So yeah, I mean, I think with the 12-team playoff, we don't really know how it's going to work because I mean, really, most of the time with that 14 playoff, you're debating conference champs is what you were doing. Most of the time it was, hey, is it the Pac-12 champ or is it the ACC champ or does a second SEC team get in or that was the argument you were having is somebody who's playing for a conference champion. Well, now that argument has shifted down and there's going to be a lot more, I guess, argument to be had. Does it matter who has the tougher schedule or does it matter who has the better record flat out? And it's going to kind of.
Yeah. I mean, I also think on top of this whole, argument is also the fact that if a Missouri does go 10-2 and Oklahoma goes 9-3, Oklahoma or Missouri starts with the better rank, and so they're not going to move a whole lot if they go 10-2. And Oklahoma, I mean, even if they don't move a lot, like they're still 5 spots back, and so the argument there is that basically that Oklahoma get into the playoff over Mizzou, they'd also skip, right over them in rankings.
Yeah.
Games.
All right. Well, we can move on. Like I said, we could probably debate that all day. It was a good discussion to have, though. Number 12, I got Penn State, similar to you. Yeah. I think you had them probably a little higher. I think they were 11 for you, and you had Tennessee at 12. But Penn State, 12, kind of the same thing. Yeah. You could swap Penn State and Oklahoma to me. Either way, I think they're going to be right there, those last 2 teams, if that makes sense. Do you have any dark horse team for the 12-team playoff?
Other than those, you see, I like Virginia Tech. It's a dark horse, so hopefully my guy on Twitter doesn't come after me for saying Virginia Tech. But yeah, I think Virginia Tech can. Yeah, it's a dark horse team. I think Virginia Tech has a good roster. No, I don't think Miami is a dark horse team, let alone a team that makes the playoff this year. But they could prove me wrong, but I've yet to see them do anything special in the past 10 years. So, yeah, I would Virginia Tech, I'd go with a 10. Of course, that 12. Hell, even the Big 12 champion, you never know what they're cooking up this year in Lawrence, Kansas. There's a couple. I would honestly, I did think about putting them down as a dark horse before the show, but you had them in your 12 team, Oklahoma. I think Oklahoma is one of those. They do have a tough schedule. Speaking of, do they? So I thought Oklahoma could definitely be a dark horse in there as well. There's a couple others, obviously, K-State and whatnot, but I mean, I can go on with dark horses, but yeah, I think those ones can.
Yeah. I think it's going to be teams,
teams like that.
They return a lot. There's a lot of production coming back and see how well they can improve. Dark horse is not usually one of those teams you factor in, because they got the high recruiting rankings or anything like that. So we can roll right on. We'll try to try our best to get through the show. Like I said, we've had a lot of technical difficulties. So who do you got any college football 25 updates for us? Anything that's going on? Did you finally leave Texas State or what happened?
Yeah. So I went to. Obviously this won't be probably won't be a week going, but yeah. So that was I guess where we can do big updates, but yeah, this is a big update. So, we actually ended up getting through another season at Texas State and so yeah, our team coach the one that he wanted. So he's like, well, going to progress the career, his young career. So yeah, we took the head coaching job at Arizona. Already got a season through that, starting the second season now. Recruiting first year, I think we finished with the 60th overall recruit class after the first year at Arizona, but first year coach. We didn't end up getting ranked number 1 in the regular season for a couple weeks. Ended up being the 1 seed overall in the 12-team playoff that year. Good roster. He was left a good roster preseason, number 15, going into that year as the first year head coach. So had a good roster, good quarterback, really good running back. Made the playoff, unfortunately lost again. So Johnny Skeeg, as a coach in general, is 0-3 in college football playoff games, and 0-2, two of those games against Georgia. So Johnny has another milestone that he needs to figure out, because there's going to be some question marks surrounding his playoff because he's 0-3 currently. But on its head coach, we'll see how the recruiting goes. Yeah, but that's a big update. We're at the helm at
There you go. So finally moved on. So it kind of cut out on me, but did you say whether or not you ever got offered the Texas State job, or they just weren't interested in you?
No, so that's why Coach Skeegs ended up leaving, because they wouldn't offer the job.
So we'll roll on. We got our last episode. We finally came up with a set name for it. Our dub and dud of the week. So Monty, who do you have as your dud of the week?
Yeah, well, we can talk about both for our dud here, because they more or less. I mean, they're not related in the subject, but they are both same college team at least. But no, my dud is, it's not that he's the loser. It's kind of a dud, a downer, because my dud is J.J. McCarthy. Obviously, getting the news today, earlier this morning, that well, obviously we knew yesterday that it was a meniscus, but we didn't know, or it was a meniscus tear. We didn't know how severe. Today, finding out that it's a season-ending injury for a very highly anticipated rookie season. Being the quarterback in Minnesota and trying to take the reins at least over there, and now we got to wait another year to see him play. Unfortunately, I was excited to see him, because obviously me, just like anybody else, had their doubts of him at the next level, but I'm excited to watch him play, and now I got to wait next year. So that can be my dud. You can go ahead with your dud.
Yeah, no, I get you on the team. Dud of the week. He had a really good preseason game there, and it's just kind of tough to lose him for the season. And, it's got to be really tough being a Vikings fan right now, where you got to look forward to Sam Darnold all year. So it's kind of got to be tough to get excited about. There's always it's never too early for a mock draft.
Actually played. Yeah, it's funny because I actually played Sam Darnold in high school.
I imagine in high school ranks, he's probably pretty good. Anytime you've lasted as long as he has in the league, you probably got some pretty good talent. All right, so my dud of the week, I went with Sharon Moore, head coach, University of Michigan. They just have a lot of. It just seems like every week something else comes out, about them. Whether Jim Harbaugh, he's getting a 4-year, whatever it is, basically can't come back to the NCAA for 4 years and coach, or they're finding out deleted text messages between him and Connor Stallions. 52 deleted messages. Who knows what the context of it? Twitter's kind of ran rampant with those rumors about what those texts could possibly contain. However, yeah, just everything that's going on with University of Michigan, it's got to be really tough going in as a first-year head coach. I mean, he played some interim last year, because Jim Harbaugh carried over some controversy into, the year they won the national championship. But, it's still just got to be really tough taking that on, everything as a first-year head coach, replacing J.J. McCarthy, replacing a lot of starters on that team. And now you're coming in as the defending, Michigan head coach. He, it's tough, man. Coming over as first year head coach, all that controversy hanging from last year, coming on this year, losing J.J. McCarthy, losing, a bunch of starters from that team that just won the national championship, expected to take your first opportunity as a head coach at a huge program with a huge fan base. They're not going to cut you much slack. So as a dud of the week, I got to go with Sharon Moore. Monty, who do you have as your dub of the week? We're going to try to get through this without having too many more technical difficulties.
So I'm going to go Danny White, keeping the traditional branding, but also signing a huge contract like that. It's going to be a exciting future for Tennessee, now extra promising than it already has. But Danny White is doing great there since he took over, and man, it's exciting to be a Tennessee Volunteers fan. So
I got to agree. I think that's going to be something you see. Football, it's going to be something that continues to build. And, you got Pitbull. He took over the branding for FIU. And it's just going to be something that's going to be – you just need to start looking at college football as a professional model. It's a mini NFL. You're going to start seeing the brands across everything. All of that.
Hey, as long as you can still hear me, my hot take of the week, just to get out of here because these technical difficulties, we can talk to people about it. My hot take: Wisconsin is, Alabama versus Wisconsin. Alabama's favored by 9.5. Wisconsin's home team, so technically Alabama's supposed to win by 12.5, but it's 9.5. Take the under. That's my hot take. I think it's going to be a lot closer than people think. I think Wisconsin's going to give them the money. Still think Alabama's probably going to win that game, but
absolutely.
I expect that game to be
so the Alabama coming in, having the Wisconsin coming in playing a closer game with Alabama. I'd say that's pretty good. That's pretty good hot take. Obviously Wisconsin, they're outweighed by quite a bit. Monty, I know you can't hear me, but I'm just going to keep going through. I'm going to get us through this episode, so I'll just take us to our outro. Like I said, thank y'all for sticking with us through this episode. We appreciate y'all for listening. Y'all can tune in next week. We'll come back to you, hopefully with a little bit less technical difficulties. And always remember, subscribe to the show, follow it wherever you listen to the show. Find the show on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. Wherever you listen to podcasts, you can find us, and just continue to give us the support and follow us on all those different platforms. I know you may follow us on one. Try to follow us on a couple. It helps out, at least grow the show, get it kind of bring more awareness to the show.